Hey guys. All right, so we are now on part three of what will end up being a 10-part series on creating a millionaire brain, creating a millionaire mind. And so far, we've gone through two parts, and this one will tie in, especially to the first part. And it's around kind of managing your energy, managing your intake, but just managing your brain. And one of the things that I think that we're taught that isn't really correct is that the brain basically we're kind of these things that can take in an infinite amount of information, and I'll tell you why not. But it's a great idea. It's great to motivate kids like, oh, you can learn anything, you can do anything. All of those possibilities are great motivators. But as you become an adult, what you realize is that you have to manage your brain like you would an employee, or like you would a computer, or like you would a server. And most people just don't. And here's why you need to kind of shift your thinking on where you're putting your focus as far as your brain. Now, one aspect of this that I think is a little more frou-frou, if you will, is that wherever you're putting your focus is going to end up being attracted into your life. And, people talk about the law of attraction and that kind of thing. I think there's a lot more practical aspect to this. And it is that wherever you're putting your conscious focus, there's all the rest of your brain, which is immensely powerful, that will start to figure out and work out those problems. I mean, we've all had that where, we're trying to figure out something, and we're sleeping, and in the middle of the night, we wake up and we have a clear answer, which I think is just amazing. I remember, I've done mushrooms once in my life, and when I just remember, it's just my own brain, but the perspective that I had and some of the answers to some of the things that I had been thinking about, it just comes from you, and that's in your subconscious. So that's one aspect of this, and why it's really important that you manage the things that you're thinking about consciously. But now let's break into just the completely practical. So there's something that I call psychic RAM, and I haven't really heard this concept, and didn't search to see if anybody else has talked about this. But from my perspective, I feel like there's just a certain amount of psychic RAM that you have, that you're capable of using in everything that you're going to get done. And it's kind of this combination of computing capacity or intake capacity. When people say, oh, like I can go out and, we treat our brains like there's just an infinite amount that we can learn. There's no limit. And, again, this ties into part one, where we're figuring out, okay, how am I going to distribute these CPUs, or how am I going to distribute the computing capacity of my brain? Once you start thinking like that, you see, like, man, I've got this limited thing. And this is why I go on my rants about, tying up 4 years of this computing capacity, or this psychic RAM, learning stuff that's not going to give you the life that you want. And why that's so crucial is when you start treating your brain like, man, okay, I've got a limited amount of computing capacity. Where do I want to spend that? Hopefully you become a very diligent manager, and you are putting those CPUs or that psychic RAM to use in things that are getting you steps closer to the goal that you're trying to achieve, or creating the life that you want to create. So I think that is something to consider. Now, let's say that even with that computing capacity, you're like, hey, like, the brain isn't going to get filled up. So it's not that crucial. I can learn a lot of different things. What you failed to kind of calculate into this is there's only a certain amount of energy that you're going to have, and there's only a certain amount of time. So if you've only got 100 years, I say, on this earth, even if though we feel like, hey, the brain, like we don't know the limits of the brain. The brain could just be this infinite thing that we could fill up endlessly with all kinds of information, with all kinds of thoughts. We can spend that time stewing over that person in the parking lot that cut us off and takes our parking space. Now, on the law of attraction side, it would say, hey, you're going to attract more of this negative stuff. But even if you don't believe any of that, just the fact that you've got a certain amount of years, you've got a certain amount of energy, you've got a certain amount of information you're able to intake and kind of do computations around and figure out ideas and come up with solutions. And so you've got this valuable computer. Now, what do you want to use it on? Do you want to use it on stewing over this person that just cut you off? Or do you want to, if somebody could build a computer that is like your brain, even for somebody who's not smart, like if somebody could build that computer, it would be the most powerful computer ever. And that, is something that you want to put to work in things that are of tremendous value. So what's the next step? If you're somebody who obviously is watching this channel, you want to be successful, you want to maybe travel, you want to, buy a business, you want to create income, some of you may want to start a business. In any of those things, what you have to do is figure out what's the best thing for me to focus on so that I get that. And I think one of the things that gurus take advantage of is this whole concept of aspiring. I'm actually not a fan of aspiring. I'm not a fan of like, oh man, I want to get there. I want to do that. And having this goal out in the future. And here's why. I think it's much more valuable to spend that time immediately. And I almost put that in the category of a waste of time, just like a waste of time would be stewing over somebody who cuts you off in traffic. As soon as you see that, hey, this is something that I want to create, it's more valuable. And if you're somebody who it wants to be extremely diligent with your psychic CPUs, your psychic RAM, you want to get to work doing what I call deconstruction. And what that means is, let me take this goal, this long-term goal, and deconstruct it into a lot of small steps so that I can take each little step and turn it into a daily aspiration or a daily goal. And what gurus take advantage of is that people see, oh, okay, I want to get there. And, I aspire to get there. And people don't take the time to deconstruct what does that look like to get there. And sometimes that could be, let me, take a course. And this was one of the things that I wanted to do in part 2 was clarify. There are plenty of things that you want to learn. You just want to be very diligent with what you're learning, because every time you're spending time learning one thing, there's a huge opportunity cost. And the opportunity cost is literally what I call 360 degrees of opportunity. So that opportunity cost is everything else on earth. When you decide, okay, this is the thing, then you can end up cutting off something that may be more valuable. And so that's where you want to spend your time. And the downside to this idea of aspiring and aspirations, which is what a lot of Instagram in the entrepreneurial community kind of appeals to, is it's counterproductive, because it could be that the lifestyle that you see that you are aspiring to, the path that guru is going to take you on to get there may not be the right path. And so the final kind of concept that I want to share with you is something that my mentor, who I've talked about, Mr. Aiken, he just broke down very simply to me years ago. And it's this whole thing called straight line theory. And it's the thing that everybody in most of people, not everybody, but the great majority of people have a goal. And instead of making a straight line and deconstructing, okay, this is the goal. I don't need to figure out what everybody else says is the right path to that goal. I want to figure out, how do I get from point A to point B in a straight line? Because anything other than a direct step-by-step process to that goal is a waste of time. And it's why, I ended up focusing on buying businesses, because I realized, hey, when I was young, I was like, oh man, I have ideas and I want to do this and that. And, again, my mentor, when he was breaking down the straight line theory, was just like, but what's your goal? And I'm like, well, maybe I'll have this big business and, I'm going to change lives. And he's like, but what's your goal? And at the end of the day, it was income. And he was like, all right, so what is the best? He was amazing at the Socratic method of teaching, but what's the best way to get there? And I'm like, well, maybe I should, build up I remember talking about real estate. I had a bunch of real estate at this point. And I'm like, well, I've got all this real estate and it's building up my net worth. And then one day I'll be able to refinance it. And then I'll have this cash. And then I'll be able to put that in the bank. And then I'll have income coming off of the investments that I've made that are index funds. And, it's just like this big convoluted plan. And where he eventually got me was just, no, dude, like that business right there is making the income that you need. That business over there is making the income you need. Don't try to start something. Don't come up with some super complicated plan. Go find who has what you want and then get that and deconstruct it back. So what you want to spend your psychic RAM doing when you come up with a goal, if you do have an aspiration, you do have a lifestyle, you do have something that you want to achieve, the smartest thing that you can do is spend time deconstructing the straight line to that. And unfortunately, it's in a guru's best interest to try to convince you that straight line, number one, doesn't exist, and that you've got to go over here and you got to learn this, and now you got to come over here and come to the seminar and learn this, and now you got to go over there, but eventually you're going to get to this goal. But it's in their best interest to complicate you getting there, because at every turn you've got to go back to them and figure it out. And it's one of the reasons that I try as much as possible not to focus on training as much as, hey, let's go do things together. Now, one of the things that I'll say for part 4, but I think is important just to mention here, is that when it comes to learning as humans, the best way that we learn is through experience. When it comes to school and all of that, this is in the last few hundred years. You've got billions and billions of years of evolution. And, as humans, we're really trained to learn through experience by evolution. That first single cell organism didn't have to go to a classroom with another single cell organism, and the other one's like, hey, what we got to do in order to become a more complex being is, we need to do this and go get with another single cell organism and combine, and eventually, that's not what happened. When you go back to the Neanderthals, the way that we got to where we are right now is going out, experiencing things together. And, I'm going to dig a little bit more deeper into that and how you want to leverage. I think that a lot of people are fighting against the wind. It's not natural for a kid to sit in a elementary school. It's just not natural. And so that kid has to fight against his or her nature. It's like fighting against the wind to learn things. And what I want you to do is figure out how to have the wind at your back. And that wind is, tens and hundreds of thousands of years of evolution that is in your DNA that, yeah, you could figure out how to fight it and try to get on and learn things through videos, or you can learn the way that we're naturally supposed to. So, hopefully this video is valuable. Let me know if this whole series, if this creating a millionaire brain, I want everybody that subscribes to this channel to increase your value. And This is the reason this is important, which I don't even know if I've talked about, but my goal with clients, people I work with, is that you can walk into any room and be extremely valuable to that room. That's the best way to ensure your financial success for forever. Money can come and go, investments will go bad. I made the video saying all of my portfolio businesses are 100% guaranteed going to go out of business. So how do you protect yourself from that? Part of it is some of the strategies that we talk about, but beyond that, if you are a walking being worth millions of dollars because you've cultivated that, you've molded yourself into being this very, very valuable source of knowledge, ideas, ways of thinking, creative out of the box, and you are this thing of value, then the money's going to come. Like it's always going to come to you. So let me know if you guys want me to continue kind of these next 7 parts of this, or if you want me to just get back, just talk about deals, talk about how I'm going to buy my next business. I'm happy to chat about that as well. Let me know in the comments. Subscribe if this stuff is valuable. Let me know what questions you have about any of this or anything else that we talk about on the channel. We've been talking a lot about the financier strategy. We're always talking about private equity and closing deals. And now my goal is to make every one of you that watches the channel this walking gold. Subscribe, comment, like. Thanks so much.